Hello and good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, we would like to tell you all that we have started a very new series on political geography. So, taking the series forward, today we would be talking on Introduction to Political Geography. And for this very discussion, we have with us in our studios Dr. Krishnendra Meena. Dr. Krishnendra Meena is Assistant Professor in School of International Studies, JNU. So, let's welcome our guest, Dr. Krishnendra Meena, and let's try to understand more and more about the topic. Introduction to Political Geography. Hello sir, welcome to the EduSec lecture.
Thank you and good afternoon, Ms. Geetika. It is a pleasure to be interacting with students all over the country and also making a contribution to this very interesting program. Today's lecture is about introducing political geography. That is a very important branch of geography, and more precisely a branch of human geography. Initially, we must understand that it is a subfield of human geography, and just as economic and social geography and cultural geography are. But the specific aspect which is very peculiar to political geography is that these are political studies which are carried out by geographers, and in which they use techniques and ideas associated with this with spatial perspectives. So what is important here is to underline that space becomes an important actor while looking at political studies. So the factor of or the importance of space is underlined in all studies in political geography. As a discipline, political geography predates economic and social geography. It has a history which goes back to the times the ancient Greeks and Romans, and in the Middle Ages it goes up to 16th and 17th century. Very interestingly, in the early development of political geography, we find that Jean Bodin, a French geographer, argued that, and this was largely in environmental deterministic geography. So he argued that the national character of any state was determined chiefly by its climate and topography, and he was underlining the fact that the people who live in a particular society are their behavior, their culture, their overall outlook about the world or the world vision has a deep impact of climate and topography, and thus the political structures which are formed in these parts of the world are a reflection of the national character. So there is an influence of geography on national character, and from there political structures emanate. Similarly, another environmental deterministic geographer, Charles Baron de Montesquieu, argued that people of different types of climates have different kinds of inclinations and different kinds of political inclinations, to be more precise. Warm climates, for example, he says that favor the growth of despotism and slavery, whereas cold climates encourage democracy and freedom. And as we move away from the equator, freedom and democracy tend to take deeper roots. So his idea again was very environmentally deterministic, but over the years, over the subsequent centuries or later time, it was argued that such a reading of political geography is way beyond the point. It is not plausible because all kinds of people can exist in all kinds of environment. Human behavior cannot be predicted only on the basis of environments or climates, which all this both these thinkers also fall in the larger category of environmental determinism or larger line of thought of environmental determinism, which argues that environment plays the most important role in determining human behavior. But modern political geography is considered to be established during the late 19th century with the work of Friedrich Ratzel, a political geographer, initially a biologist and geologist, but later on he trained himself in political geography and wrote a very important treatise called Politische Geography in 1897. But the background to his work on political geography in 1897 was another book called Anthropogeography. We are all familiar with the term anthropology, but his work was basically based on the relationship between geography and humans. And these two volumes basically laid the background for what is now termed as political geography. But his whole idea was to argue that it is a scientific study of the relationship between society and nature, and that requires a definite system of concepts. So this definite system of concepts later on went on to become the field of political geography, which actually established the relationship between society and nature. And he was also influenced in his work by the ideas of Darwin, who in his very important work Origin of the Species argued that there is an impact of environment on humans, and as organisms grow, they are conditioned by the environment. And similarly, he was arguing his case on those lines, that the state also functions as an organism, and it tends to take birth, to grow, to become mature, and then subsequently to diminish or to decline as a human being does. But he also argued that state itself is a living body which has extended itself over a part of the earth and has differentiated from other bodies which have similarly expanded. So what the political unit, that is the state, he considered to be a living body, and that's why his ideas are called organismic theory of the state. And he argues that then all the states are similarly expanded bodies which have expanded over the Earth's surface, and they keep on competing with each other to establish their control over larger spaces. And these expansions he termed as the conquest of space. All states strive, as we know today also, that states strive to capture or they covet territory more than anything else. Geographical space is considered to be the most important aspect and tangible aspect of politics in the international system. That's why we have a lot of territorial disputes emanating from this desire to conquer space. And this desire to conquer space was formalized by Friedrich Ratzel in Lebensraum. That is the geographical area, he argues, within which organisms develop. So he argues that similar to the organisms, as they require space to develop, states also require political units, and states also require space to reach their natural limits. And this geographical area, this Lebensraum or the living space, is that geographical area within which these organisms called states develop and subsequently grow, mature, and then subsequently die. A very important contribution to the work, to political geography subsequent to the work of Ratzel is a part of geography, but in a sense it is geopolitics. Geopolitics also is a subdiscipline of political geography, and which focuses on the aspects of international location, and which lays down the strategic imperatives of a particular state. But the later ideas, for example, from Sir Halford Mackinder, which the idea of geographical pivot of history, which he elaborated and which he expounded, which was later developed into heartland theory, was one such idea from geopolitics, but still keeping its roots intact within the larger field of political geography. And Halford Mackinder argued that, and he in fact started a geostrategic tradition in political geography, and which provided, in his opinion, a framework for strategic thinking during the Cold War phase of the USSR-USA relations. It is argued that it is on the basis of Halford Mackinder's theory of heartland and the geographical pivot of history that the United States policy of containment was based. And he was a very important geographer of his times. He went on to influence a lot of decisions in the British Parliament also, as himself was a British MP. He was instrumental in the beginning of the 20th century, influentially in establishing a lot of geography departments all over the United Kingdom. And that's how his ideas of geography, or more precisely political geography, came to be spread throughout the English-speaking world. Further, there were people like Isaiah Bowman, who was a chief geography advisor to the American government and who also played a very important role with his book titled The New World, Problems in Political Geography. So he was arguing from an American standpoint that is the New World, which the New World is, as we all know, was the North American continent, which was established by the migrants from Europe. And this, he argued that for the way United States could expand its strategic understanding is possible only with a deeper understanding of political geography of the United States. So, and he was also advising United States in those terms, in strategic terms. Then, political geography also had its share of infamy during the 1930s and 1940s, when the work of a German geopolitical thinker who was deeply influenced by the ideas of Friedrich Ratzel and Halford Mackinder, he attempted to develop a special kind of political geography as a political tool for the German state. His work on German geopolitics or geopolitics was linked with the Nationalist Socialist Party or the Nazis before the beginning of the Second World War and during the Second World War. He contributed a lot to the radio broadcasts and all other forms of propaganda, media dissemination in Germany prior to the Second World War as well as during the Second World War. Some scholars have also argued that he, in essence, prepared a blueprint for German conquest during the Second World War, and that was instrumental in, and it is also argued that in some ways he was also involved in educating Hitler and his deputy Rudolf Hess, and that led to a lot of negative publicity for political geography. It carried on for a long time. For the next 40 years to come, political geography was not regarded as a serious discipline because of the infamy, because of the bad image negative image it had acquired during the World War II. And this is still, this condition of, or this link with the Nazis or the Nationalist Socialist Party is considered to be the main reason for decline of the subdiscipline of political geography, and more precisely geopolitics. Geopolitics became a very reviled term, this term was attached with a lot of stigma, and with that, political geography was also looked upon with a lot of suspicion. This phase carried on for a longer period, and it was this phase that during the post-World War II, that due to the linkage with the Nationalist Socialist Party of Germany, the field of political geography, still very vibrant one, but it retreated to the safer realm of the study at the scale of individual state, rather than analyzing international relations or rather than analyzing geopolitics at the international level. The studies in political geography were now more confined to the domestic aspects of state or at the level of the intra-state. And there are a lot of examples. Derwent Whittlesey, in his book The Earth and the State, argued for such an approach to be to consider the development within the state first and then later move on to the projection towards the international system. But there were exceptions also. For example, Nicholas J. Spikeman, a very influential thinker in the United States. He was trained as a sociologist but contributed significantly to geopolitics also. In his writings during the war, during the big war, the Second World War, he wrote his a very important book, The Geography of Peace, and within which he argued that it is not the heartland of Mackinder which is important to gain supremacy in the world system, but it is the rimland which is spread around the Eurasian continent, at the coasts of the Eurasian continent, which was important to be acquired, and subsequently the world domination could be achieved through that. Similarly, Alexander Dostoevsky argued that it is through air power that a state can become a superpower. With the tactical use of air power, with the development of a supreme air force, a state can become a very important air power. So this phase, though it was a negative one for political geography as well as geopolitics, but there were still people who were writing about geopolitics. In the 1950s, the discipline witnessed very important papers by very important scholars in the United States. For example, Richard Hartshorne wrote on the functional approach to political geography. Stephen B. Jones wrote on the unified field theory which he created, analyzing the ideas of his predecessors Richard Hartshorne and John Gottman. Gottman spoke about geography and international relations, so establishing the link between geography and IR was his prime work, and that gave some credence to the declining discipline of political geography and the so very reviled discipline of geopolitics. And subsequent to that, till the 1970s, the discipline seemed to lose its way. It was in more or less deviated from what political geography was understood to be since the beginning. And but on the other hand, human geography in general was flourishing. Political geography, though, was in decline, but human geography was flourishing because of the inception of quantitative revolution in human geography. A lot of borrowal of positivistic ideas, and from there a lot of empirical studies were conducted in human geography. Therefore, in general, human geography was still flourishing, but political geography and geopolitics witnessed a little bit of decline during this phase. Further, in the 1960s, there was, to make political geography more relevant, some scholars borrowed from political science so that the discipline can be revived, or their studies reflected a lot of involvement of studies from political science, or political science as a discipline became more prominent in geographical studies also. The examples can be cited in the writing of a book titled Political Geography by Kasperson and Mingy in 1969, which did not yield successful results, and it was deemed that this is not the right way to proceed for political geography as a discipline. On the other hand, there was again an exception during these 2 decades of 1960s and 70s, that is Saul B. Cohen, still writing in the mold of traditional geopolitical thinkers like Halford Mackinder, Nicholas Spikeman, and borrowing also from, in some senses, Friedrich Ratzel. He argued that geography and politics are important in a bipolar world, and that was reflected in the title of his book, which is called Geography and Politics in a World Divided. But during this phase, political geography had already retreated to the state scale. Human geography was dealing with the intrastate matters, and urban geography or urbanization, or the studies of urbanization or urban areas, became a very important aspect of human geography. Though political events in the late 1960s had an effect on the social sciences, and human geography in that sense brought political dimensions to the forefront in the larger realm of geography. Similarly, economic and social geography also started to include political indicators and variables for analysis and interpretation. So in some senses, this was a sort of a little revival for the field of political geography, but still all kinds of studies were being conducted apart from the international aspect of geopolitics. A lot of other studies confined to the level of the state, intrastate, urban, rural, they were being conducted, and gradually in other divisions or subdisciplines of human geography, a lot of political factors were also being involved. This led to the creation of a new kind of geography influenced by Marxist ideas, which argued that a lot of capital accumulation is happening, and there are geographical implications for this accumulation of capital in the international system, as well as at the level of the state, as well as in the domestic scenario, as well as at the level of the urban areas. So Marxist geography basically began with an argument. This was an argument that the urban spaces are now deeply influenced by the right to space, because as capitalism expands, it also is expanding its special dimensions, and it is occupying a lot of space in the urban arena. We must also remember that this was also a phase when the United States was witnessing a lot of debate about racial segregation and racial discrimination. So within the cities of the United States, there were areas which are, even if not formally designated, but they were spaces which were only meant for the colored population or the black population, and that created a different kind of geography within these major cities. And United States, as we all know, is one of the most urbanized places in the world. So those urban spaces looked very different from a Marxist point of view, and that was the goal of Marxist geographers to analyze. We also but a minor revival was witnessed, a little revival, not to a large scale, but a revival of political geography was witnessed in this phase in the 1960s. Economic, social, and radical geography started to contain topics on subjects which also dealt with in political geography. So this was one phase which is still understood to be a very important one for a gradual revival for political geography. During the 70s, we find that urban conflicts took center stage in human geography. For example, in political location of goods and bads with their externalities led to a welfare approach. So distribution of different goods and bads within the society, and especially the spatial distribution of goods and bads within the society was becoming more and more important to understand how society functioned and how can it improve with more focus on what is with more focus on this kind of distribution, which was supposed to be uneven in nature. Another important aspect during the 70s, and this was a phase when a quantitative revolution was contributing a lot to political geography, or in general electoral geography or human geography. So a lot of techniques of quantitative revolution were involved in electoral geography, or were utilized to understand problems in elections or electoral patterns in the United States as well as some parts of Europe. So a lot of attention was dedicated to the practices of gerrymandering, wherein constituencies were formulated or reframed, or they were divided again so that one political party could gain more of the votes, or more of the votes can be garnered by one political party. So and this was very political in nature, because apportioning space for the benefit of one particular party was very, very political in nature, and it had implications for political geography in general. But this also contributed in many, many senses to the revival of political geography. So if we look at the period till the 70s, we see that in many ways a lot of different kinds of studies were going on in the name of political geography or under the banner of political geography. Even human geography with its clear categories of social and economic geography, political geography, and cultural geography was not clear as to what to be included in which stream of human geography or which subfield of human geography. For example, political geography was still concentrating on international or the global level, and on the other hand, we still find that national level was also being studied in political geography, and also intranational or urban levels were also brought in as a binary in political geography. All these aspects were also studied by not only economic geographers, not only electoral geographers, but also cultural geographers and social geographers. So this was a phase where there was a lot of incoherence in the field itself, which contributed to a little distraction from the field of political geography. But that was not to remain the same for a longer period, and that changed during the 1980s to which we will come in the next session. Thank you. Carrying on from the discussion we just had, we'll now proceed further to the 1980s, as we are doing a sort of introductory history of the discipline of political geography. We see that during the 1980s there were three groups which could easily be identified in the field of political geography. The first is the status quo group, which accepted institutions and society, and which still continues to research many of the topics in traditional political geography. These scholars are more concerned for political order and stability. The second group is known as the reformist group, which is supposedly dissatisfied with institutions and society and advocate limited change in the larger system. And in the 1980s itself, a very important aspect of political geography started to develop, that is a merger between political geography and radical geography among political geographers, who argued they generally did not accept the institutions which are already there, and they did not accept the existing social and political order. But on the other hand, their criticism was that they did not also suggested ways forward, and they did not wish to reform the existing social order, but they provided a deep critique of what was existing, or the existing social and political order, or in many cases a critique of the international system. For example, the study of the world system analysis by Immanuel Wallerstein, wherein he argued that the world can be understood by dividing it into three categories, that is core, semi-periphery and periphery. Though these divisions were based on development, and these divisions have taken root in the international system. These terms, though the study was during the 1980s, these terms are still used to depict developed countries, developing countries, and underdeveloped countries in the international system. And other meta-geographies or other terminologies have been used and to understand the international system on the basis of development, which designate certain geographies as developed ones and others as developing and underdeveloped societies. Examples of this could be found in the terms like first world and third world and the global north and south. All these are products of this kind of thinking, wherein there was a lot of critique, and there was a lot of critique of the political economy, critique of the political economic system of the world which operates but without providing any solutions for the same. Since the 1990s till 2010, three theoretical viewpoints have become very important in political geography. They are basically spatial analytic, which argue that the space or terrestrial space has direct causal effects on the conduct of politics. So still falling in the environmental deterministic mold, they argue that not the hard land surface or space in which human beings live have a very important effect on the conduct of politics. So all politics, according to them, is conditioned by the influence of geography, and that has an imprint. Politics has an imprint, deep imprint of geography. The second viewpoint, or the second theoretical viewpoint, is the political economic viewpoint, in which the distribution of political economies is seen as the outcome of institutional processes that inscribe themselves in space. So the political economy scholars look at the distribution of political activities and argue that it is because of the institutional processes, that is the decisions taken by different state institutions, that have led them to distribution of things in the space as they look now. And the basic argument was that there is a deep relationship between politics and economy, and that is how it plays out in the international system too, not only at the level of the state but in the international system too. That is the main way of how we can understand things. The third theoretical viewpoint within political geography, which is also very prevalent now in geopolitics and known as critical geopolitics, is called the postmodern approach, or the postmodern theoretical approach to understand political geography. And it is a range of ideas which question the possibility of objective knowledge, which look at the social position of the writers and the nature of language as not simply constraints but fundamental barriers to knowledge, independent of social, political standpoints and linguistic conventions. So they basically argue that no knowledge is objective. There is a lot of context which goes on to make what knowledge looks like now and what knowledge is perceived to be. So a lot of situational aspects are implied in what knowledge is and how it has been understood and how it has been presented in the international system. So the any scholar, any academic thinker has a particular context, and it is all his ideas are a product of this particular context, and he cannot be separated from his social, political and geographical context. More important here is this geographical context, which involves a lot of dimensions of society and politics. In this and the current research as well as emphasis in political geography is on postmodern political geography, and we'll talk about from here onwards about political geography and postmodern political geography, and towards the end of the lecture we will look at some definitions and analyze them to understand what political geography is. So, but the postmodern political geographers have now invoked a discursive formation as advocated by Michel Foucault, the French philosopher. His ideas have been incorporated in most of the social sciences, and political geography has also incorporated the same. So, Michel Foucault argued that the meaning of language is not transparent and immediately obvious. Words, statements, symbols, metaphors and so on mean different things in different contexts, and that is why knowledge takes a different shape. That is why that is why we need to understand all these statements, symbols, metaphors with a critical standpoint. Similarly, the meaning of a particular statement depends partly on who is saying it, because he is born out of a context, and how it is being said, because he is speaking in a particular time frame, but also on how it fits into an existing wider pattern of statements. So the discourse these statements, these wider pattern of statements forms, and statements, symbols and understandings forms a discourse within which these statements, these ideas have to be located. He further explains that it is this wider pattern which is known as discursive formation. This pattern of statement, symbols and understanding in which there can be different meanings, there can be different interpretations, in which there can be different viewpoints which are forwarded. So this discursive formation is important to understand how geography shapes politics, as well as how politics shapes geography. Within the discourse analysis, it is argued that there is an important relationship between the discursive and material, which means the statements about a particular material aspect of life are based on some deep thinking, and there is a deep relationship between how different objects are represented in the international system. It is a language which makes these material objects as material because of this particular terminology which they use for naming them. Further, discourse analysis argues, rather than politics as being a science or a system, they argue that politics is always a process with its important features, which in the context of political geography one can understand with these 4 points, that politics is constituted through geographically and historically situated social and institutional practices. Those practices are both material and discursive in character. Practices are both purposeful and strategic, which means that all politics is carried out with some purpose, and there is a strategy devoted to the outcomes which any individual or group wants to achieve through his kind of politics. And these practices depend on the availability of unequally distributed resources. So people who are ordained with the larger amount of resources, financial or otherwise, have more to contribute to the debate, to the discourse, because they are financially, economically, and in terms of the production of knowledge are better situated to produce certain kinds of knowledge which benefits them. Further, we must stress that the focus of politics, geography, and subsequently political geography is to communicate. It can be understood by these 5 focus points, or by these 5 important aspects, that the meaning has to be communicated about any event, any phenomenon, and political geographers also, drawing from work in cultural and media studies, they have become increasingly interested in the ways in which social life is rendered meaningful to people, which means how social life is represented by way of words and symbols and statements to people. This process of ascribing meaning is seen as an unequal one, because the resources are unequally distributed in society, so that different meanings operate to advance the interests of different people or social groups. So at one point, one kind of a meaning of a particular event may be more important, and at another point of time, another viewpoint about the same event may be important, right? And the second focus of political geography studies is the production and effects of discourses, and which is related to the first focus. That is, the concept of discourse refers to a range of meanings or meaningful statements which come to be linked together in a broader framework. The framework or this framework or discourse provides a particular mode of thinking which allows us to understand things in a certain way. So there is an effect of these discourses which makes a lot of sense to a wider audience, and through these understandings they keep on looking at the world from different perspectives. Human subjectivity and identity is the third focus of politics geography and political geography, in which one has to understand that all the subjectivities of who we are, or rather who we feel ourselves to be, and or who we are made out to be, are given to us by the society. It is the subjectivity and identity human subjectivity and identity are products of the social interaction of human beings, and most importantly, through the use of a particular kind of language, these meanings, these identities are provided to humans by the society. Political geography also seeks to provide a critique of geographical knowledge. It argues that geographical knowledge does not consist of transparent and value-free truths. It can be questioned, and most of the times, but that has been assumed in the past, that we are provided with transparent and value-free truths. We take all maps to be maps as true, but they may not be true in many circumstances, in many situations, in many parts of the world. So we need to understand that, the projections which are used to depict maps, they may be providing false information. So this is one example, but one can find many wherein one can argue that this is not a transparent and a value-free truth. And geography or discourse analysis, or more precisely political geography, needs to question the same. And we need to understand that, like all knowledge, it is the product of particular social and political contexts, and as such it advances certain interests, often at the expense of others. And last but not the least, and perhaps the most important too, is the operation of human agency. Human agency plays a very, very significant role in how social outcomes are decided. So it is the human interventions or intervention of human capacities which leads to different kinds of outcomes, social outcomes in the system. When we must also understand that while human beings are not just able to do anything they please, but on the other hand, human agency makes a difference to how we understand things in the international system or in our societies. Even if its effects are not always intended, we must understand that human agency is always situated in and conditioned by particular geographical contexts. With this rendition, a long rendition of what political geography is, what it ought to be, how it has been framed, we need to understand that as the major concepts, political geography envisages within its fold 4 important concepts. These 4 key concepts are important in understanding politics and geography, and subsequently political geography. Space remains the key concept in all branches of geography, and political geography is no exception to that. Place is another key concept because everything happens at one point or the other on the Earth's surface, even if it is the oceanic surface. So place also has a very, very important role to play in how we understand different aspects in the society. Landscape forms, as the initial slides had shown, that, or the initial rendition was about how environmental determinism played an important role in the development of political geography itself. We still study landscapes as an important aspect of our larger ecosystem, right? And this leads us to believe that landscapes have an important role to play in how societies are framed, societies are understood, how societies behave, or how individuals behave for that matter. The last important concept is environment, which has garnered a lot of attention over the last 3 to 4 decades because of the viewpoint, because of the generally accepted viewpoint that the environment is in decline. There are a lot of problems plaguing the Earth's environment, and which is going to cause a lot of problems for humans. And that understanding is also has also acquired special attention in political geography. If one were to understand politics and the relationship between politics and geography, or to look at how politics and geography interact within this larger framework of political geography, I think this figure explains. This figure has been borrowed by a work by Jones et al. By Jones and Woods. So I have appropriated this for the better understanding of political geography. If you look at the politics part of this prism, you will see that power, politics and policy play an important role in understanding in the politics part of political geography. So the politics in political geography constitutes of power, the workings of power in the international system or local context, in domestic context, wherein the politics is important to understand all kinds of the strategies adopted to attain particular outcomes in the system. Policy is also an intended strategy to achieve certain established goals, certain established aims in the system. On the geography aspect, in this double triangular figure, you see that space, territory and place are the important variables which interact with power, politics and policy. So territory in the case of international system, space and place I have already explained through the last slide, and this is how politics and geography together come to make political geography as we understand it now. Now we will look at a few definitions by political geographers, beginning with the most important, the political geographers in the beginning of the 20th century and coming till the recent definitions of political geography. If you look at, and I think the discussions which we had since the beginning of this program are illustrative enough to be combining these definitions into one. Towards the end of this program, we must focus on these definitions, because you will find that each of these definitions covers or comprises of one or the other aspects of political geography which have been discussed till now in this program. So the first definition is by Richard Hartshorne, which is still popular, or it is still widely accepted by scholars alike in the international system, not only in the Anglo-Saxon world but other parts of the world as well. So Richard Hartshorne argues that political geography is the study of the variation of political phenomena from place to place in interconnection with variations in other features of the earth as the home of man. So the variation of political phenomena, and so the distribution aspect is very important in his definition. So he argues that various phenomena are distributed on the earth's surface differently. They are unevenly distributed, and we must understand this uneven distribution of political phenomena with the uneven distribution of other features of the earth as the home of man. So the human agency is very, very relevant, but in a little in a very understated passive manner. He calls it earth as the home of man, but nonetheless humans are very important in his definition. Alexander argues that it is the study of political regions or features of the earth's surface, and he argues that political geography studies political regions which may range from any scale, beginning with the most smallest scale, that may be at the level of a small locality, a neighborhood, and from there to a village, to in the Indian context a subdivision or a tehsil, to a further movement to upwards to a province, a state, or in the larger context of nation states or larger states, and from there at the international scale, regions at the international scale, and from there to the global level. So all these scales are understood by political geographers. All these existing scales should be understood at the under the larger rubric of political geography. An ad hoc committee on geography constituted by the Association of American Geographers, which is a prime organization for geographers in the international academic system, they argue that it is the study of interaction of geographical area and political aspects. So they have kept it very simple. The geography part comes from the territorial or the land surface part of it, whereas the political aspects interact with them to bring about what political geography is. Then we move to definition of political geography in the 1960s. During this phase, we have a definition by Solby Cohen and Rosenthal, who argue that political geography is concerned with the spatial attributes of political processes. So the term space and the spatial attributes, the term space being, or the concept of space being the most important concept around which geography has organized itself, the field of geography has organized itself, becomes extremely important. And he looks at the spatial attributes of political processes. The next definition is by Kaspersen and Minghe, who argue that it is the study of aerial structures and interactions between political processes and systems, or simply the spatial analysis of political phenomena. So these two scholars basically focus on the spatial analytic theoretical viewpoint of political geography. So political processes and systems are interacting with spatial structures or aerial structures in their definition, or he argues that the political phenomena should be understood or analyzed, interpreted in a spatial context, in the larger spatial context. Further, Kevin R. Cox, another important geographer from the United States of America, he argues that political geography should be defined in terms of its key concepts, which the proponents of this approach generally identified as territory and the state. So his inclination is more towards the term territory rather than space, and more precisely the political aspect in political geography, the political dimension, is brought with the inclusion of the state. The state, as we understand, is the political organization which runs political organizations which run a lot of political units in the international system, or the most of in the international system, states are the most important actors. But the underlining aspect, the underlining geographical aspect, according to Cox, is the territory for these states, for the better understanding of political geography. In recent years, you find the definitions by a prominent political geographer from the most prominent political geographer of our times, John Agnew, who argues that political geography is the study of how politics is informed by geography, which is very simple but very informative also, and very, very precise, because all politics in some ways or the other is informed by geography, geographical attributes or some phenomenon, geographical phenomenon. All political events have a geographical imprint, he argues, and that information, that geographical information, has to be extracted from all political phenomena. Joe Painter argues that he is in the postmodern strand of political geography, and he argues that it is a discourse or a body of knowledge that produces particular understandings about the world, characterized by internal debate, the evolutionary adoption of new ideas and dynamic boundaries. So he argues that it is a discourse, it is made of different meanings which are provided to the world. There are particular understandings of the world which are very significant to understand the world. There is a lot of internal debates. There can be multiple discourses to understand one particular phenomenon. And the evolutionary adoption of new ideas is one important aspect of this discourse method in political geography. Mark Blexel, in the end, that is the last definition which I'll supply or which I'll elaborate upon, he argues that political geography in the broadest sense is the academic study of all these varied resource conflicts and the way in which they are resolved. In other words, it is about the forces that go to shape the world we inhabit and how they play themselves out in the landscape across the globe. So he argues political geography is about appropriation of resources of all kinds in the international system, be it human, be it capital, be it physical resources, be it raw materials. So it is about the contest, the struggle to gain access to these resources that political geography forms an important part of. And it is also about the forces which go on to shape the world in which we live. Therefore, and how they play out themselves across the globe. Thank you.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so very much for giving us a very, very precious session on political geography. Dear friends, we would like to tell you all that this lecture is going to be uploaded on YouTube very soon. So keep watching this lecture, and afterwards, if you feel that you want to ask a question, you want a question to be answered, then you can mail us at info.cec@nic.in. We would be meeting again very soon and would be talking more on political geography. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again.
Thank you.